Melee builds have been a conversation topic for a very long time in any ARPG, as it puts you in the most dangerous position you could be in, right next to the enemy. In Last Epoch, this is made even worse with the spam of endgame that is Osprix, Ember Mages, Smoldering Lithrax, and Diamond Matrons. So, it's hard for a build to push itself over the edge of viability, and it's even harder for it to tune damage to make it feel comfortable when it comes to melee setups. And on top of all this, dual wield is another topic of discussion. Taking 15% increased damage is a very big downside, but it has insane upsides too in niche situations. One of the biggest upsides of dual wielding is how attack rate functions. If you have a one-handed sword with 1.2 attack rate and a one-handed mace with 0.98 attack rate, it ends up averaging to about 1.08 attack rate, which it makes using maces a lot more feasible in the long run. Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and this is Ignite Consumption Physical Crit Dual Wield Rive Paladin, a build born out of my willingness to make a point that dual wield is not inherently bad, nor is melee builds in Last Epoch. Normally, this is where I'd suggest you like the video and subscribe to the channel, as that's the best way to support me currently, but that is plain wrong now. I have gone through the process and enabled channel memberships. So if you ever wanted to support the channel even more, there's a button for it now. I plan on doing fun stuff with members eventually in the future. But let's talk about the build now, shall we? Let's explain the concept of the build. We are using Rive for all of our damage and clear. It is a 3-hit combo ability, 2 short melee attacks, and 1 large circle AoE. The small attacks have an added damage effectiveness of 100%, while the circle AoE is 200% added damage effectiveness. We then grab Focus Strike. This disables the 1 and 2 attacks from critically striking, but makes our 3rd strike always critically hit. This is very important for the build and the node you take first, as it allows us to completely ignore crit on our gear, allowing us to scale our damage and defenses even further. The node the whole build is built around, though, is Execution. Essentially, our 3rd strike consumes every ignite on the enemy, and it gives us 15% increased physical damage per ignite for 2 seconds. This is all of our increased damage that we'll ever need, and it allows us to ignore that stat on gear as well. Currently, my setup reaches to about 1100% increased physical damage. That is enough to make it so that we can ignore it everywhere, and getting damage on gear is kind of a waste because of that. We get ignite chance everywhere we can, though. Paladin is nice because it gives us about 200% free melee ignite chance. Then Sigils gives us another 120% ignite chance on top of that. Then of course, we are dual wielding so we can get ignite on each suffix of our weapons. The main reason we are dual wielding is to take advantage of some class affixes that Sentinel has. Melee physical damage while wielding a mace and sword both stack, meaning that if we end up with an Exalted Chest with T6, T7 Fizz while wielding a mace, which I don't have for this video by the way, we can essentially scale flat physical to the moon. We can also get these affixes on our helmet. This can almost double our melee physical damage with the right gear, and it is one of the best ways to scale our damage since increased percentage damage is completely useless for us. Then, of course, we abuse bases like Katana or Doomstar, as getting a lot of critical strike multiplier is just free damage thanks to Focus Strike. And we also use a Saurian Step, as 100% melee critical strike multiplier is hard to pass up on. I was trying to farm a good pair with LP on them, but I never got lucky. I actually spent most of this character's time on getting one of those, so I ended up saying screw it and just moving on because I need to eventually make the video, don't I? One beautiful thing about this build is how it can easily do tier 4 Jurla versus other melee builds, thanks to Challenge, which lets us pull Jurla into melee range. One of the worst problems melee builds have in common in last Epoch is when Chronomancer Jurla moves into the middle of the damage over time beams, and there's essentially nothing you can do about it except just cry in a corner. But thanks to Challenge's poll, we can cosplay as Scorpion from Mortal Kombat and bring that piece of shit closer to us. This is also amazing for clearing trash, as bringing enemies into our third strike AoE is great quality of life. The one last thing I want to talk about is one of the defensive layers this build has access to. We can put Sigils of Hope on instant cast because we gain mana every time we attack with Rive thanks to Time and Faith in the base Sentinel tree. This means that we don't need to reversal trick our sigils, and it also allows us to essentially spam it. I don't put it on autocast numlock, but I do use them a lot. That's because we can use Faith. Once we take a hit that is 25% of our HP bar, we will heal a fixed amount and sacrifice a sigil. This scales with healing effect, and right now I have about 130% increased healing effectiveness, which would bring our healing from it to about 460 flat HP. So we have a decent defensive layer when we get hit hard. Since our prefixes are essentially open, we can stack healing effectiveness on all of our prefixes and push this to its logical extreme. If we get up to like 500% increased healing effect per se, which is not really hard to do, we would heal up to about a third of our current HP value every time we take 25% or more of our HP in one hit. Absolutely mental, and it's a really good defensive layer on any build that can use it. Now, after all of this, let's go in game so I can give you a better in-depth look at the gear and the skill choices of the build. Alright, here we are in game with the build. Name's Random Clusterfuck, don't ask why. So essentially, the idea with this build, the skill rotation, is to essentially make sure we get up to 4 sigils. We can just hold down the button. You don't need to like run reversal tricks. This is actually really good if you hate maintaining your sigils, because now you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, then just spam our abilities on single target. It's pretty simple. We make sure you're in melee range so that you're attacking with all of your attacks, and then of course just go to town. This build's really good at face humping things, and that's essentially one of the best things it can do. Right now, as you can tell, we're getting an insane amount of increased damage, which makes it so that we really don't have to worry about things at all, which is great. Yeah, that's pretty much the dummy DPS showcase. Now, for the skills that I choose. For Rive here, we take 2 points travel into Flurry, 4 points travel into Concentration, which do nothing because of Focus Strike here. Focus Strike makes it so that our third strike always crits, but it makes it so that our second and first strike never crit. It's fine because our third strike is what's doing all of the damage. Now we grab 2 points travel into Outburst. Rive's third strike deals damage in a larger area. We like the AoE. Then 1 point to Overwhelm. 40% more damage with one node is great. We're not really scaling the physical damage over time from Laceration, which is fine. Then 3 points into Brutality, which gives us another 45% more damage. Then we grab Challenge. Challenge allows us, with our second strike, to pull in enemies into our melee range, and it makes the build feel so much better. This is like the star of the show right here. If Rive didn't have this node, this build wouldn't feel nowhere near as good. Now we grab 2 points travel into Sever for Ignite Chance, 1 point travel into Twisted Fangs, then 1 point to Execution. It makes it so our third strikes consumes all the ignites on the target. So here, I'm going to show you, bam, bam, bam. Now we get Ignite Chance, bam, 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 bam. As you can tell, our physical damage starts to skyrocket, which is great because it means we don't need increased damage on our gear at all. Then of course we take 3 points into Savagery, which gives us 45% more hit damage versus ignited enemies. Now, I've tested this a bunch, and it seems as though the 45% more damage applies to the third strike, even though it's deleting the ignites. I think what happens is the third strike hits and then it consumes the ignites, which means that the enemy is always ignited for your third strike as long as you're like rotating through your skills, which means this is literally just 45% more damage. Who would have thought, right? I thought that this didn't work, but I tried it. Yeah, it works. Cool. That's pretty much it for Rive here. Sigils, TLDR, same sigil setup as every other build. You want as much armor as possible. I want the instant cast so I don't have to, do casts and I can sustain the mana of it thanks to Rive, right? Then, of course, like I said in the intro, the faith stuff. This is great because it gives us a lot of chunk that we normally wouldn't have. One of the benefits of playing a build that can spam sigils. Reversal, same TLDR setup, spamming it as much as possible, getting the 60% increased enemy damage taken, getting the attack speed, the movement speed. Now we do grab time loss wisdom and time loss vitality because we don't really care about mana or HP, and it brings our reversal to 2.4 seconds, meaning that we can essentially spam it. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you could actually double dip on this and get up to like, I think 120% increased damage taken, I believe. I'm not entirely sure if that works or not. I'm not entirely sure. Then, of course, for Holy Aura, just gives us a bunch of increased damage and Ellie Res, and a bunch of Ellie Res here makes it so that we don't have to run as much res on gear, which means we can stack HP as much as possible, which means we can get really chunky. And of course, 5 points into Call to Arms. I'm not entirely sure if this is worth it. You could always put it into Redemption for increased healing effectiveness. 4 points into Fanaticism, which then goes up to 32% attack speed. And trust me, you want as much attack speed as humanly possible. Then 3 points to Rise Devotion, which goes up to 24% chance to ignite. You want as much ignite as possible, but like I said, we could always go into Redemption for increased healing effect. But yeah, Holy Aura is pretty simple. Smite, TLDR, it's just our movement skill. We use Descend. We get the attack and cast speed buff for 4 seconds. One thing to note that's important is we grab 5 points into Valiant Charge, which gives us movement speed, cooldown recovery speed, which does apply to Smite because it gets turned into a movement spell after grabbing Descend, which is great because otherwise you'd have a 6-second cooldown instead of a 4.4 second, which is a lot better. Trust me, it is a lot better with 4.4 seconds. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the gear, for the passives here, there will be a last epoch build planner in the description, but TLDR, you want as much ignite chance as possible, which is great. You want to make sure you can grab reversal. Time and faith is very important because it allows us to spam sigils. I really like Axe Thrower because it gives us an extra ignite per second, which means even more ignites that we can consume. This this does increase our single target significantly. It won't show you on the dummy how much ignites you get because it doesn't attack the dummy because it doesn't count as an enemy. At least that one doesn't. And of course, 5 points into Blade Dancer, so we get the attack speed. This is not double dip anymore, so we only need 1 sword, right? That's pretty much it for the passives. Like, if you need the passives, it'll be in the description below. Now, for gearing, there are a few things I would do to upgrade this build. First thing, I would get a pair of LP Malin's Hubris. I have not gotten a pair of LP Malin's Hubris. I would use like a 2 LP pair of Malin's Hubris. Why is that? Well, it converts bleed chance into ignite chance. And there is a lot of bleed chance here on the tree, 120% here. And then, of course, we could run bleed on each suffix as well. As long as we get some armor shred somewhere else, we could run bleed, ignite, and of course get armor shred somewhere else, like on the amulet or the gloves. And that means we can also run bleed idols as well. That would be great, but if you don't have like a 3 LP one, I would suggest probably not using it. And that's pretty much it for like extra stuff I would grab. I would, of course, suggest getting a LP Saurian step and putting movement speed on it, but that's kind of obvious. Now for the helmet here, you want melee physical damage while wielding a blunt weapon, and same with the sword, because one-handed mace counts as a blunt weapon and katana counts as a sword. Essentially, if you get a really good setup, you can essentially add an extra weapon's worth of damage with just your helmet alone. Of course, the usual other affixes like vitality, HP, and all that. This helmet's actually really good. It's not that bad. This is actually really good. Now, it is on the wrong base though, in my opinion. There's a winged helm base that gives us increased melee attack speed up to 8%. That would be a better base than the Myrmidon helmet, but it's whatever. No harm, no foul. Amulet, my amulet's absolute garbage. I just wanted an Oracle amulet because one of the biggest problems with dual wielding is since you're taking 15% increased damage, that applies to damage over time, and that sucks. Try to get a better one than me, try to get up to 20%. Of course, the HP and the physical res is great. You'd want like critical strike multiplier and Phys pen or healing effectiveness. One of those would be great on the prefixes. But yeah, my amulet's absolute garbage. My weapons, I will say this is like the most unluckiest, like this is the unluckiest character I've played in a long time. Literally no good LP weapons. Literally. It's sad. These are the best weapons I could come up with, which aren't even that good because we could get exalted ignite chance, exalted shred, exalted attack speed, exalted physical damage. Like there's so many things that we could get on a Doomstar or a Katana that I'm very surprised that I didn't even get one. But yeah, I didn't. So just try to get these, but with exalted affixes, right? Chest, this could be so much better if we had to like T6 or T7 melee physical damage while wielding a blunt weapon. That would be insane, absolutely insane, because it rolls up to like 40, I believe, which is almost as much as an entire katana worth of melee physical damage in terms of the base, which would be absolutely mental. I didn't. My chest is pretty garbage. But yeah, I would try to seal a T1 Rive because it makes it so that you can get every single node in the tree and you don't have to like lose a node in like brutality or savagery. I would heavily suggest getting +1 to Rive on the chest though, at least. Then for the ring, I really like One Siphon of Anguish because the melee leech is really strong. That in combination with World Eater means we get 5% melee leech. Now you could run Assassin Sustenance, which gives us a bunch of global health leech. The problem is it takes a point on Rive's tree, and Rive, you're kind of like point intensive. So this plus, of course, the points inside the passive tree is great for leech. Because the more leech you get, the better sustain you have. And the better sustain you have, the more you can tank. And of course, Doom is another 20% increased melee damage taken on the enemy, which is great as well. Of course, movement speed. Siphon of Anguish is just a really good base. Belt. Don't ask me what happened to this belt. TLDR, it's a good belt. It's a lot of HP. It's good. Just confusing what happened to this belt. Silver ring. This is an okay ring. Eventually, you'd want like a multiple LP Siphon of Anguish with good mods on it, but this works. Healing effectiveness would be better than that physical damage because then our sigils would heal us for more. Gloves. This is pretty much exactly what you want, except instead of that attunement, you want strength, because strength gives you increased armor, which is great because we want as much armor as humanly possible. On bosses, we get up to like 10k armor thanks to Throne of Ambition, and it essentially makes up for the fact that we're dual wielding, and it makes up for the fact that we're not wielding a shield, which is great, and means we can face tank bosses, which feels great. Of course, like I said, Saurian Step. Eventually, you want movement speed on these babies, so you can like move at like 60% increased movement speed. Feels great with a melee build because you always need to be in melee range. You want movement speed. And of course, the relic's pretty simple. Instead of physical damage, you could get crit multi or you could get healing effect. Either way. And of course, I got a bunch of physical resistance because we need to make up for the downside of Saurian Step and HP. Idols. I like this idol specifically, increase area with Rive and ignite chance while high health. I was using 2 of these. You don't need 2 of them. 1 of them is fine. 1 increase area. That's about where the area feels great. But I was using 2 of them for most of the character until I upgraded to a throne. But then we're running. Eventually, you want 3 of these. Cold damage taken as physical because a lot of the big hits like Durla's Cold Wave, I believe, is cold damage, so this allows you to tank it much easier. And Ignite while at high health. You want 3 of these. Right now, I'm running an Armor Shred on Hit Idol. That's just because I don't have that much Armor Shred. Don't be like me. About for a day, I was like complaining about my damage. It was low. That's because I was running no Armor Shred. Make sure you have Armor Shred in your gear, guys. And that's pretty much it for idols. Like you can run a 1x1 with healing effectiveness and like a 2x1 with HP. Yeah, that's pretty much it for idols. You can run a crit multi idol, like a Rive crit multi. That would work for single target. Like if you go and like do Jurla, if you have a crit multi idol with ignite chance on it, that would be great for single target. I did not drop one, so I wasn't able to run it. So I'm just running the area one instead for now. But it's up to personal preference at that point. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the builds gearing. If you have any questions, leave it in the Discord, or of course, leave a comment down below. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread from Epic Builds. Off to go play another build. Bye.